So I felt like talking about 28 years later. Now, I watched this movie just yesterday and I didn't have a crazy amount of expectations or hype going into it. I was born in 2006, so I wasn't even around when 28 Days Later came out. And though I had heard a lot of things about it, I had never seen the movie until 3 or 4 days ago when I was kind of prepping for the release of this movie, and I figured I should watch 28 Days Later. I thought 28 Days Later was great, despite not knowing all the kind of visionary things that it did for the horror genre. I thought kind of the perspective of having it shot on a camcorder, clearly being visible that it's a low budget movie, yet having those stakes feel very real, and having a deep connection with the characters and a captivating story that takes twists and turns that I do not expect even towards the end of the film, I thought was a really great experience. I would call it an easy 9 out of 10 film, maybe even higher than that over time. I am not a big horror genre person. I don't watch a lot of horror films, so it felt very fresh to me. And I think even though I have heard that it informed a lot of things in the genre, like it brought about running zombies, like it was the first movie to do that, like it still felt fresh to me even today. Maybe it's because of the fact that I don't watch a lot of horror movies now, but I thought it was a great foray into the genre and I really enjoyed that film. So from that perspective, I was definitely excited for 28 years later. I was excited to see where the story was going to go with Danny Boyle and Alex Garland coming back from 28 days later. Also, I did not watch 28 weeks later in the middle because I was hearing things like it has pretty much been retconned, or like, yeah, I didn't feel like I needed to watch it because I also heard that these movies are more like very not extremely connected to each other. So I figured like knowing about the rage virus and all the various sort of origins of the story in 28 days later would be enough for me going into this film. So I did not decide to watch 28 weeks later, and I don't think having watched 28 years later that was anything that was brought over from that film or felt like it was a part of like piece of the puzzle that I was missing. But going on to 28 years later, it was definitely a very interesting film. Like it did a lot of things that I did not expect it to do, and did not do not expect any movie to do, to be very honest. Like it was a very it was definitely a trip to be watching this movie. It was a journey, and I kind of enjoyed it for that. I feel like I have reached the place with movies these days where anything that is unpredictable and anything that kind of surprises me when I'm in the theater just instantly becomes good for me, because I've reached the point where the same sort of tropes and kind of story beats coming up, I have like completely gotten over that. And while I can definitely enjoy a movie that has like inspiration from other movies and follow certain predefined tropes, I feel like those movies don't leave an impact on me anymore, like movies that are shocking and kind of surprising or do things that are unconventional, even if they don't always fit. I respect those movies more for trying and like aiming to do something different, rather than the movies who follow the same kind of pattern and end up being like forgettable to an extent. And I think 28 years later definitely fits into that category of being an extremely interesting and experimental film. And having watched it, I can definitely understand why the reviews for this are so divisive and people don't seem to agree on a bunch of things about this movie. But for me, I think for the most part, the movie really worked, and it really captivated me with all the different things it did. The major standouts for me throughout the entire film were the editing of the film, the cinematography, of course, and the score. I think these three things were undeniably like completely top tier, and they kept me engaged throughout the entire movie, and I was noticing some of the choices that were being made by the director, by the cinematographer, and the people who worked on this film that were unconventional, and it was really fresh for me, and I really enjoyed most of the things that they implemented doing this. I also enjoyed a lot of like the trippy kind of elements that show up in the first part of the film. While I by no means like want to say that I understood all the symbolism in the film or why certain choices were made, I definitely would say that they captivated me in a way that I was really engrossed in the movie, and I was really into the world and into trying to at least understand what the director's vision may be or what is trying to be put through in this movie. I thought the change up of protagonists was very, very interesting. I did not expect it to happen at all. And I'm kind of glad that I didn't watch a lot of reviews, like other than just the scores before going into this movie, because having come back, I've seen a lot of people's reviews, and some of them kind of go ahead and tell you about this kind of protagonist shift that happens in the middle of the film. And I feel like if I had known that from before, it would kind of dilute the impact of that for me. So I'm glad I didn't do that. And I would say for most people to like go into this movie fresh without watching a lot of reviews, because a lot of it is like, I think a lot of the impact of this movie comes from the divisive nature of its facts, and none of the people doing the reviews can speak truly about their feelings of this movie without spoiling at least a little bit of something, even if it doesn't substantially reveal anything about the story. Just discussing the structure of this film even feels like a spoiler, because a lot of the uniqueness of this movie rests upon those laurels of having you surprised, having things take different turns at points where you don't expect. And even talking about it a little bit kind of, I feel like, would ruin the impact of the movie for me. So I would suggest that anybody who watches this movie go in blind for sure. Um, though now that I think about it, it might be bit late in the video to be saying this, given I've already talked a little bit about the things that happened. But anyways, I don't feel like re-recording. So yeah, 28 years later, I thought the story was extremely captivating, and there are a lot of tonal shifts that take place in this movie, and I am not completely certain about how I feel about these tonal shifts. I think, again, this video is completely gonna be with spoilers, because I talk about all the stuff I talk about has spoilers. So, uh, the character of Eric, who is a soldier that is introduced about halfway through the movie, enters our protagonist Spike and his mother on their journey to the doctor. And he becomes like the comedic aspect of this film for a solid 15, what feels like 15 to 20 minutes. And he's kind of part of this journey. He adds a lot of, I think he adds also a lot of perspective about what is happening in the outside world, out of the quarantine zone of what seems to be the United Kingdom and like the island basically. And to me, his character felt like it was gonna have much more meaning than it ended up having. I think my theory about this is that his character was supposed to redefine or like reintroduce the stakes of the film, because jumping off of like 28 days later, which is my only comparison point for this movie really, that movie had a set of core characters that you really connected with, and it also had deaths amongst those core characters that reminded you that this world is gruesome and really nobody is safe, so you don't really know what's going to happen by the end. Initially, we see this with Selena's friend, like when Killian Murphy's character, forget his name, I think it was Tom. When Tom is rescued by Selena's character and his friend, the guy, like, you kind of associate them as major characters in this film, right? Because other than kind of like the environmentalists or whoever come in to break out the monkeys at the beginning of the film, these are the only other characters except for our obvious protagonist that you have seen till this point. So you associate them as being important characters until Selena's friend dies. And that is kind of like the first major point where it's like, okay, nothing is certain in this movie. Anyone could be dead, and you don't really know who to trust. After that, we have the father and daughter that our current two main protagonists encounter. And then the father ends up dying through what seems to be a very trivial kind of mistake, if you will. Like, you would not expect it, and yet it happens. And those are the kind of things that really define the stakes for those movies from the get go, and it makes you keep reminding yourself that you don't really know. It's kind of like Final Destination in a way, where you don't really know when or how these characters might end up dying, and no one is really safe because no one knows what's happening with the infected. So even when they reach the army base camp, you still have that eerie feeling of, I don't know if these people can be trusted or not, and like, there seems to be something amiss here. And even though that twist in the end completely caught me off guard, there's always that sense of uneasiness that exists throughout that film. Coming back to 28 years later, I feel like there is a distinct lack of that in the first, like, in a lot of the journey that exists in the first half and a little bit further of that of the film. In the sense that when Spike goes out with his dad to the mainland, the stakes are definitely high. That is probably my favorite part of this entire film. I think it really engulfs you in the world, and you're kind of viewing it through Spike because he is being taught all of these things and we are being taught with him as the audience. You see the desolate world, you're introduced to the new types of zombies, the fat crawly ones, and then there is a lot of impact in the action that happens there. It gives you the feeling of being chased in this world where, and in this space where there is really no place that can guarantee you safety unless you can get back to the island that exists as that kind of light at the end of the tunnel when you're able to get through this expedition that you've come out on. And all of these things were really great ideas for me, and it was really working very well. And even though I've heard people call the pacing of the movie kind of slow, I really enjoy slow burner films, and I felt like we were building up for like an extremely powerful, impactful, and well delivered film. So all of that was pretty exceptional for me. You see the alpha for the first time standing on that hill, and he keeps standing there, and it's really harrowing and scary, not in the way that like shock scares you, but it gives you kind of like those chills where it's like, okay, what the hell is that guy doing there? How long will he keep standing there? And there's also that sense of mystery building up where Spike sees the fire and his father denies knowing anything about it, but it's clear that he might be hiding something. He's been on expeditions before, so surely he knows something about it. You see that there's definitely something wrong that's going to happen. And then the chase back when they get back to the island with the alpha chasing behind them, all of that is like exceptional. It's fantastic. And from there, I expected the movie to go in a very different direction than it ended up going in. And I feel like that is to its positive and also to its detriment at points. But coming back to the point I was making while comparing this movie to 28 Days Later, you don't see the core group lose anyone at any point who seems of substantial importance to the film. Like, the closest they come to this is that they remove Aaron Taylor Johnson as the what seems to be the likely protagonist of this film completely, and they don't address it at all, which I thought was quite jarring because there's no cutback to his kind of perspective. Because Spike basically sees that his dad cheats on his mother, and he leaves with his mother to find this doctor when he finds out that his father lied about this not knowing what the fire was, and it was actually a doctor who could perhaps help his mother, who is going through some sort of disease at this point, which we don't know to be his cancer. So, and then Aaron Taylor Johnson is just gone. They never cut back to him. They never show him kind of trying to maybe go after his son and being denied by the villagers, because they say in the start that if you get left out of the mainland, there's going to be no search party coming for you. So a lot of those threads don't ever come back, and his character is just pushed aside. But he doesn't like die, or he doesn't kind of like get injured or removed from the situation in any sort of way. So I feel like when this Eric character shows up and within 15 to 20 minutes he's dead, I feel like the only point of that could have been to show that the stakes still exist and anything could happen. But I feel like it just doesn't do it as well as 28 Days Later was able to do it. It doesn't even come close. I think the movie would have been much better for the sake of the movie if like Eric stuck around and then he kind of joined the party. Maybe towards the end, something happened that kind of forces Spike to rethink everything that he has seen till now when he actually sees someone from his group die that is not his sick mother, which is kind of like only making the inevitable less painful. So I feel like that opportunity completely goes remiss. Another thing that while like I said, I didn't go into this movie having a lot of expectations. Another thing I did kind of think about would be the direction the movie was going to go in once like the initial setup was done and father and son were out on the expedition. I figured that we were gonna find out something extremely messed up about the village itself. Like previously we see a lot of kind of montages with kids training with their arrows, which is like cut in between with like medieval knights or something training, and we also see this like jarring cut-ins of this person with a mask and like red paint on it, and like I don't think it ever comes back in the film. Like it comes back through this editing style again and again, but we don't really know who this cult or this group is and what's really like the relevance of that. I thought this movie was going to delve into something messed up about this village community, and like there's going to be some sort of thing under the sheets where like something is not right, and it would lend to that eerie sense of what we found with the army guards in 28 days later. But this time it would hit even closer to home because this was the only community Spike had known since he was a kid, and it turned out to be this messed up group of people who were like cannibals or something or the other. Maybe that would have been too predictable of a trope when it actually happened, but I feel like that's what it was going to build up to, and to me that felt like it was going to be an exceptional payoff, and it would like kind of link together that eerie feeling that the film was trying to kind of have from the start, even with the Boots, Boots, Boots song that was featured in the trailer that really drew my attention to this movie in the first place. I thought the use of that was exceptional in the film as well, but it kind of, all of those factors that were made the first half really special for me kind of started dying out, and they were swapped out for different things and different kind of thought provoking, or some might say confusing choices that happened in the second half of the film, which I still appreciated, but the tonal shifts did feel slightly jarring, did feel slightly like uncalled for at a certain, like to a certain extent. Like Eric as the comedic relief character, I have no problem with that happening, but then he just dies, and there's, I feel like other than showing the brutality of the alpha, which is like extremely fair, and the alphas were one of the best part of this movie as a whole, I feel like it didn't do enough to justify its place in the movie over there. And but at the same time, like a part of me also thinks that these are the things that build up this movie to what it is, in the sense that it's kind of trying to show these different factions of people that have become the norm in the aftermath of the infection having spread, and these people are so different from one another to an extent where it feels like this dystopian, disjoint society within a very confined space, while the outside world seems to be going on like completely like normal. So I don't know if these things hadn't been in the film, whether it would have been as good or as impactful or as memorable as it was now. But I also can't come to terms with the fact that a lot of these things did seem out of place to me, and did seem like they could have been paid off in different ways that could have been possibly less jarring than what we ended up having in the film. I also feel like the second half definitely slows down a lot, um, in favor of delivering those emotional beats with Spike and his mother and her having cancer, and a lot of philosophical things about death that are brought in with the doctor character played by Ralph Fiennes. And I think all of those things were great, but it could have been paced out a little bit better, or like brought in a better way. I think nonetheless towards the end of the film, when Spike basically is able to, well, he takes the baby that is, yeah, and also the baby subplot existed, which I don't know the relevance of that either. There were a lot of moving parts in this movie which feel like they'll probably hopefully be connected in the sequel, which I didn't even know this was going to be like a new trilogy sort of thing. I hadn't done all of that research, so it was a bit weird for me to find that out and see the amount of dangling threads that were left by the end of the movie. But nonetheless, I still appreciated a lot of the weird, quirky things it did. I think the editing was fantastic. Like all the bow and arrow shots, it does this effect which kind of makes it feel like a video game zombie chase to an extent. It does like this slow down shot edit thing, and I thought that was great. I thought it really added impact to every single death of um, every infected that is killed. And then the ending of the movie happens where, so in the beginning of the movie we see this group of children watching the Teletubbies when I think it's placed at the time when the infection first spread. And then there's this one boy Jimmy who kind of is able to survive it, but his dad thinks of this as the day of judgment. He hands him his cross, and we see Jimmy again at the end of the film leading this sort of Kill Bill ninja style um, cult where the people are dressed up as Teletubbies or something like that, which is like such a weird tonal shift to happen at the end of this film, and it leaves a lingering taste which definitely provokes a lot of thought, but I'm not sure yet if it's in a positive or a negative way. And I think that's how I feel about a lot of this movie, especially in the second half, where a lot of these weird things start to happen that I don't really know. Like I said at the top of the video, I really appreciate this movie for all the swings it takes and for being somewhat mainstream after the success of 28 Days Later and it being this event of Danny Boyle and Alex Garland coming back together. I think it is admirable that they took the amount of swings that they did and tried a lot of different things. It's by no means, I think it's by no means like a massive mainstream blockbuster, but I feel like it's still there in people's visions to some extent or the other. And so I appreciate all of the things it did to make this non-conventional and different from anything I had seen in the past. Having said that, some of it definitely does come to the detriment of the movie a little bit, but it feels more jarring than it does comprehensive by the end. I am nonetheless very excited for this new trilogy of films that has been announced and planned, and I'm looking forward to what they do in the future. I think this is easily an 8.5 out of 10 kind of movie, and it may, depending on the day, it may jump to a 9.5 for me. It may also jump to a 7.5. So I it's a very weird movie, and that's what I love it for the most, and I think it's definitely an experience worth having and worth a watch for everyone, but I can't guarantee whether you like it or not. But yeah, that's mostly what I have to say about 28 years later for now. Peace.